Hello, this is Jordan Schroeder from HEFESTIS. I'm here to talk to you today about cyber incident escalation process. In HEFESTIS, we've talked about breach management and incident management, and we have the comprehensive incident management framework. But one of the things that I find organizations, both inside HEFESTIS and outside, have problems with is that escalation process. How do we do that? How do we do that efficiently so that people know when to do it and then make sure that we have the appropriate resources at that level? And how can we do this effectively so that we've got the right amount of response on the particular incident? And that's difficult because you've got incidents you can't predict. You don't know what's going to happen next. So the things I want to go through today are some really high-level concepts that I hope will help you define and perhaps improve your existing escalation process. So the first off, we want to talk about the why. Why do we want to escalate? A lot of places use the escalation process, to a major incident as a sneaky way of informing management. Management or stakeholders will want to know if something happens. This is not a great use of the escalation process because every time you escalate, every time you declare something a major incident, there's a high resource cost for that escalation, usually in the way most programs are done. And there's a bit of a chaos cost because now you've brought in a change in leadership, a change in management, new people have come in. There's a chaos cost to that. If you want to use the escalation process as a way to inform people, then do that instead. Use the normal ticket and have a severity flag or a tag or some other mechanism whereby even a small incident can be used to alert the senior stakeholders, managers, or whoever might be interested in this particular problem. So if it's not for oversight and if it's not for informing other people that something has gone wrong, what is it for? The escalation process is inherently for resources. You want to escalate to get more resources and more authority over those resources than you currently have. And as you define that in your policies and procedures, make it very, very clear. Make it very, very simple and very clear as to why you're doing it. Have one reason and with a clear goal. And the idea here, the concept here is that resource management, this is a resource management tool. This is not a communications tool. Most organizations tend to use it. You want to define the resources at the various levels so that those resources can be brought into play when needed. That's why we have an escalation process. The next question is when. When do you trigger an escalation process? And I've seen a lot of debate and a lot of different ways of doing this. One of the common ways is to do it based on metrics based on potential impact. So if X number of users are impacted, or if X number of dollars or pounds are at risk, then you need to do an escalation. That's not really helpful either, because in the complexity and the uncertainty of an incident, you might not be able to know. You might not be able to accurately do that. The last thing you want your responders, the people working in an incident, to do is to hesitate, get confused, or sit there and try to work through a little flow chart to try and work things out. You need something clearer, and you need something far more decisive in this process. So what I suggest is taking a look at the trigger to get support to contain impact. The trigger to get those resources necessary to contain the impact. So it doesn't matter how big the impact is necessarily. It doesn't matter how big it could be. It's about, can we contain it with the resources we have now, or is it going to get bigger? If it's going to get bigger, we need more resources, we need to escalate. And it's that simple. And so that doesn't mean now we do this based on a hard metric. It's now up to the individuals involved who are facing this problem right now. If you have a junior technician who may have all the resources available to a senior technician, but the junior technician doesn't feel that they can contain the impact and deal with this, then they need to escalate. A senior technician might not, but the person that's dealing with it right now did, so we escalate. The other question that this brings up, and we have some freedom for, is who triggers that escalation. Typically, it's the technician, the people working on it, the manager on duty at that particular point in time. But you could also have a senior manager or another related stakeholder say, I think we need to do this differently. I think the containment's going to expand. We should escalate and bring in those other resources to make sure that containment's assured. So you get this flexibility, not just from the people who are involved, who could get tunnel vision, but you also have the ability to escalate from people who are outside of that initial sphere. So the goal, the when, is containment, right? You want to contain the impact so it doesn't grow. And almost at that point, it doesn't matter how big the impact is. If we can deal with it with our current resources, it's not a major incident. If we can't, then it is. We need to escalate. So how does the scheme work? How can we boil this down to something really, really simple? And I've got a handy little diagram here. The idea is you want to make your escalation process containment-based. We want to contain this before it gets bigger. We want to make it resource-based. Do we have the right resources right now in order to contain it, to make sure it doesn't get bigger? You want to be free to escalate. And this is the other point, which is extremely important. That junior technician needs to be free to say, I need help, right? I don't think I can contain this. I need help. And that technician, or whoever that is, needs to be free to do that. So you need to be free to escalate at any point. It doesn't mean then the entire team gets activated, perhaps just the initial point of contact who can do a bit of an assessment and maybe assign different resources so that you don't bring in the whole chaos cost of bringing in another team and a whole bunch of other people. But you need to be free to escalate, and no one should be punished for escalating. To hand in hand with that, you need to have a free de-escalation process. If the person to whom it's been escalated says, we've contained this, right? It's already contained, we're good, then we need to de-escalate. Even if it was truly a major incident, even a crisis incident, it doesn't just end, right? It sort of slowly stages itself down. So you just de-escalate your way down to free up those resources. You're not committing all these resources to a problem that's already contained. And the diagram I have here is really quite simple. You have these concentric spheres of resource and authority. You have that first responder. They have all kinds of resources and authority and tools and buddies and even their managers. They have those resources. And then if there is a lack of containment with the goal of being containment, then you just expand the sphere of resources and authority. And then you expand the sphere again to get more resource and more authority. This makes the escalation process and the procedures and the policies really quite easy to define now, because you're defining the resources and authority in each of these spheres. So if you can define that, then it becomes very, very easy then to adapt and respond appropriately in an adaptive way to whatever is going on. You just have resources that are available to whoever needs them in that particular moment. And then you can expand and contract as necessary to get the right level of resource. And then, of course, as I've said very often, the most important part of incident response is the lessons learned. And one of the things you can then take a look at is, was the escalation done appropriately? Was it done optimally? Did we escalate too soon? Did we escalate too late? Could we have de-escalated sooner or later? And the organization then can learn how this process can be improved and optimized over time in a very adaptive way. And I caution about adding too much procedure, playbook, flow charting, and make it adaptable, make it free, make it up to the people involved, and just have the supports in place from management that are available for these people to tap into. So you have this escalation process and these resources at each of these spheres. So the question is, what if we do this freedom thing, and what if we have all these resources and people start, abusing the resources or triggering them before they're necessary? Well, yes, that's a risk. But as part of the lessons learned process, you learn together what you can do, and you can make sure that your resource management in the middle of an incident is properly aligned as you go. Right? It's very flexible, very adaptive, and it's extremely efficient doing it this way, as opposed to flowcharting it to within an inch of its life. All right. That is some general concepts, some very high-level concepts for cyber incident escalation processes. If you have any other questions, as I said, make sure you ask either your regional CISO or myself, or leave questions in the comment section below. Thank you very much. This has been Jordan Schroeder from HEFESTIS.